All right, here we go. Hey, everybody, this is Logan and Keith. We're coming at you. This is the Wednesday night Podclass, and we are continuing our study through Isaiah chapter 2. Last week, we discussed what this restoration terminology is referring to in Isaiah chapter 2, and we looked at a couple of different positions, but as far as where I am in my study, I believe that this is referring to the peacetime that is fully realized during the reign of the Messiah, because I have trouble seeing this peacetime anywhere else, especially in the Old Testament. I don't see this kind of peace ever. And so, am I absolutely right about that? I don't know. I'm going to study that for the rest of my life and we'll figure it out. But as of right now, that's where I am. And I encourage you all and Keith and everybody to study that too and see what you arrive at. And so there is a judgment that is coming from God. Are you okay? Keith is here with me. He's trying to finish up his dinner. I finished up mine right before I started, so it wasn't really fair. God is judging the nations, rebuking, correcting, refuting many people in verse 4. And in the book of Isaiah, in the book of Amos, in the book of all of them, most of them, especially with Obadiah and Nahum, there is this understanding that God is the judge of the nations of the world. And so you think about that and you go, okay, so God chose the Jews, okay? He gave them the law. He gave them a standard, okay? And so when he judges the Jewish people, he judges them according to that standard. So the question is, what standard does he judge all of the nations of the world if he did not give them the law?
Yeah, that's a question a lot of people have, I think. In fact,
Yes,
I would say the majority of people probably don't fully understand that concept.
Yeah, but it's a good question because
probably the number one question I think that gets asked in like youth group classrooms.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
We're going to answer it today, tonight.
Woohoo.
Get excited.
Woohoo.
I'm not. The Bible is. But yeah, let's flesh this out just a little bit so we know what we're talking about. The Old Testament, in the law, it says, "Thou shalt not steal." If you're reading the King James, Jew, if you're reading the King James, that's what it says. And so, if the Jew goes off and he steals, God says, "Bad, and I'm going to punish you for that." And so that makes sense. And then when you're judged for your sin, you say, "Okay, I deserve that because according to the law, this is what is wrong. I did that, and I deserve punishment." Of course, in the law, there was also this protection. There was this system established in place so that you could also have forgiveness for that stealing. And so the law didn't really forgive the sins. It wasn't designed for that. It was designed to tell you what you did wrong. God's forgiveness is going to do that whenever you are obedient and compliant to his law. Okay, so now you've got a guy who's from where are they from? Let's call him a Moabite, okay? Because Ruth was a Moabitess, remember? From the lineage of Jesus.
Right.
Ruth, let's say her distant cousin, goes off and he steals. Does God does God have the can God judge him the same way that he would judge a Jew, fairly and honestly? And think of it in terms of like a police officer. Let's say I commit a crime in Oklahoma.
So the obvious answer is God is going to be God can do whatever he wants, right? But what you're saying is play along with the metaphor, right?
Yeah. It's like, does God is the Moabite under God's jurisdiction?
Right.
It was really the question in during the Holocaust trials. If you remember that, do you remember that?
The Nuremberg trials?
Yeah, were you alive then?
I wasn't alive then.
I don't think I was either.
I don't think you were either.
But during that time, they were holding Germany. They were taking them to court, basically, to simplify things. By what standard are they going to hold them accountable for the crimes that they committed?
Right.
Were they crimes that they committed? According to German law, they didn't break any laws.
Right.
And according to German law, for example, the United States, they can't bind German law on Germany. That's outside of their jurisdiction.
Right.
And also, you can't bind Germany with the United States law. The United States says, you can't murder, commit genocide, to some degree. So if it was an American that did it, we'd be like, okay, we're going to hold you to U.S. law. Well, how can the United States hold Germany to United States law when they're not American citizens?
Right.
So what law do they get to hold Germany to? What standard? Well, they said in the trial a higher standard, a higher law. Obviously.
Yeah. Crimes against humanity, right?
Right. And they appealed to kind of God's law, God's standard, which is the only thing that they could do. If you think about that, if you look at it purely from just the laws of each nation, the United States couldn't take Germany to trial, and according to the German law, and they couldn't take them to trial according to the United States law. So how are you going to, what are you going to do? Okay. So, are the nations of the world outside of God's jurisdiction? Well, of course not. But what standard is he holding them against? Because he did not give them the law. It's the Mosaic law. The answer is in the New Testament. In the Old Testament, I think the implication is simply that God created mankind, and so there are moral obligations that God places on all of mankind. And if you don't maintain those moral obligations, then you will be judged by God. So Romans chapter 1, I think, at least to my estimation, I think is the best explanation as to why this kind of worldwide justice is even fair. You said something that I want to talk about. God can do whatever he wants. Is that true? Well, yeah. With a caveat. He's not going to do anything that God shouldn't do. If that makes sense. He's not going to do something that's not fair or just. He is just.
Right.
And so if he judges someone, he's going to do it because they deserve it. He's not going to do it because they don't deserve it. He's not going to judge the innocent. We're going to get in that in our study in Hosea this next Sunday morning. And so in Romans chapter 1, it says in verse 18, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness." So God's wrath, or his judgment, or his justice, is coming against people who are acting ungodly, not meeting the standard of God, unrighteousness of men. Why are they ungodly and why are they unrighteous? The reason is because for years, hundreds, thousands of years, sometimes maybe even, they have suppressed the truth. So what does that imply? What does it imply? They have suppressed the truth.
Yeah, they've this measure of truth, they've kept other people from hearing or knowing it.
Which means that they, at
Knew the
one
truth
point,
themselves.
knew it, had it. Exactly. I mean, we're not talking about mankind being these people that God created and just, okay, you're on your own, have fun, guess. No, they had it, they knew it, and then over time, through ungodliness and through unrighteousness, they were able to successfully suppress what mankind needed to know in order to know God and how to live right in His sight. So when they're living unrighteously, what are the implications? That they could live righteously. And so it was a possibility for them, because what may be known of God is manifested in them, for God has shown it to them. God has not been passive. He was active in this process of making known what people need to know in order to know that God exists. It requires a high degree of stubbornness and arrogance to assume that the world can exist without God. And people who approach the topic with just mere curiosity, they don't do justice to the confusion that exists by the irony of existence, the oxymoron of existence. If energy cannot be created or destroyed, then how is it that energy exists? The only solution is that it's eternal, and yet evidence shows that it's not. So, question is, how did it become created? Well, someone had to create it. Well, no one is there to create it in a naturalistic worldview. See, everything that you need in order to assume God, to see the essentiality, the necessity of the existence of God, is all right there. It's plain and clear. You have to be really stubborn and biased against the existence of God to presume that he doesn't exist. And so since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. You've got an argument of the beginning here. You've got an argument for intelligent design here. And so not only that, he moves on to kind of a moral argument as well, because they are living unrighteously and they are living ungodly. So how do you prove the existence of God? Well, you do it through the beginning, you do it through intelligent design, and you do it through the moral law, the moral standard. If there is a moral standard, there must be a moral standard giver. Who is the moral standard giver? Well, in a naturalistic worldview, there is no moral standard giver. Okay, but that's not the world that we live in. The world that we live in is that God exists, and that he has not only given the evidence necessary to believe that he does exist, that necessitates its existence, creation, the beginning, and also design, that would necessitate, if God exists, then therefore my behavior, I am now accountable to him. I am now obligated to live a certain way. Now, what is that way that I ought to live? In the Old Testament, everything changes when Christ comes, but we'll get to that later. The answer is in chapter 2,
right,
and verse 12. For as many as have sinned without law will also perish without law, and as many as have sinned in the law will be judged by the law. So,
yeah, this is what I was thinking of when we were talking about
thou shalt not steal. How do you know that? Well, because the law told me. I'm a Jew, and the law told me. Well, what if you don't have the Mosaic law? Okay, well, I'm not going to be judged by that Mosaic law, but what am I going to be judged by? It says, for when Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do the things in the law, these, although not having the law, are a law to themselves, who show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and between themselves their thoughts accusing or else excusing them, in the day when God will judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to my gospel. And so the standard by which they live is the right and wrong that, yeah, it may be in the law, but it's not the law that they're the standard by which they're being held to. So we have an innate ability to know that if you walk up to an individual and smack them in the mouth, that's not right. Who taught you that? Well, no one really taught me that. I just kind of know it. Harming someone is bad because it hurts them. And I mean, I'm sure there's some philosophy here that we could get into that maybe to a depth that we probably don't want to get to right now. But the point is this: nations of the world can acknowledge that there are things that are objectively right and wrong. Not all of them will source that standard of morality in God, but God is the source of that standard of morality.
So the idea of the law itself is that it's not super complicated anyway. You know, I mean, it boils basically down to love your neighbors and love God.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're doing those things, then you're not going to do the things in the law. So you don't need to know every word and every letter of the law to actually live by the law, right? If you love your neighbor, you're not going to covet, you're not going to steal, you're not going to commit adultery, you're not, I mean, do you see where I'm coming from? You're going to honor your mother and your father. These things are all things that are going to be done by you anyway. Mm-hmm. And so it's not such a stretch to imagine that, you know. But I think the question that might be coming to some people's mind would be, what about the laws given in Deuteronomy? Right?
What about it?
Well, I think there might be some confusion as to whether or not that constitutes a part of the law, because certainly there is a lot more complexity to some of the commands given there, right?
So the law given to the people of God when they came out of Egypt was to ensure that they could maintain at least a standard of holiness to a point that they can actually enter the land of Canaan. The reason they don't immediately enter the land of Canaan is because of their sin, which is, you know, they don't want to go in the land of Canaan. So God says, okay, you're not going in the land of Canaan. And then they say, no, okay, now we will go in the land. Well, it's too late.
Yeah.
So we could get into that. But Deuteronomy is actually addressing a different audience than Exodus and Leviticus. The audience that Moses is addressing in Deuteronomy are the people that are actually going to go into Canaan. So the law doesn't change. It just is now put into a context of Canaan living.
So the important thing to note is that different things are written for different people, and they need to be you need to know the audience and the context, like we were talking about at the beginning of this book. It's important to know who it was written to, like studying Revelation, right? The audience and the immediate audience. And so the only reason I bring that up is because that is a question that gets asked a lot, I think, also, in that.
Yeah. What was so essential about Deuteronomy is that the people of God already had everything they needed. What they needed was someone to preach to them the application of the law in a Canaanite setting. So right. It's almost like what preachers try to do today. They read you the scripture, and then they say, okay, this is what this looks like in your life. You go out, you go to school, you go to work, you are around other people. Don't do the things the sin that they want you to do, that they're trying to peer pressure you into doing. Don't engage in that. Just like Moses was doing. Okay, if there's one God, okay, but they're going to suggest that there's more than one God. Don't worship those gods. And then what happens if there are people that are saying, well, God told me this, well, okay, here's a way to discern between what is true prophecy and what is false prophecy. And so, and also, what is so essential about Deuteronomy is is the heart behind the individual that keeps and maintains the law. The circumcision of the heart, this idea of it's not just removing external impurities, it's removing internal impurities. In other words, I want to be pure in my life, free from any, I'm using the word filth, but what I mean is just sin and dishonesty and lies and deceit. And I want to be sincere in my approach to God and with people, and to treat them correctly. For example, in the book of Leviticus, you have this command, when you harvest your crops, don't harvest the corners, so that people who are traveling through can take the grain from the quarter of the fields. Okay, well, that's all well and good. And if you're a Jew and you've got a list of things to do, okay, harvest the crops, leave the corners. Okay, check, I'm good. Okay, but what is the purpose behind that? What's the reason? I think Leviticus 19 gets at it, but I think what Deuteronomy brings to the table is something really special, and that it says, you're doing this out of wisdom. You're doing this with understanding. You're doing this because your heart is circumcised. You're doing this because, God did this for you, and now you're going to do this. So it just helps the whole picture, the picture be well-rounded. And it's a really essential book for understanding. I think it's the most spiritual of all the books of the law, because it explains a lot of the purpose and the intention and the motivation behind the person who obeys God. So it was it was essential for that purpose. What's wrong?
My dog's barking in the back. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, that's okay. It was essential for that purpose. But we look at the book of Genesis, and we look at the nations of Moab and Ammon and Edom and nations like that, and even the nations of Babylon, and all the Mesopotamian and Egypt. For example, the Hebrew word for Egypt is something like Mizraim or something like that. Mizraim was a son of Ham. You remember Ham, Japheth, and Shem. So Ham produced Canaan, and Canaan produced Mizraim. So Egypt came from, one of the brothers of that came from Noah. So that origin, where they came from. Same with Nimrod, who established the city of Babel. And on other Mesopotamian cities, it's like, well, he came from Canaan as well. He came from Ham as well. So you have all of these places. Genesis is making very clear that originated from one of the sons of Noah. So yeah, they definitely at one point had the truth, and God is well within his jurisdiction to judge them.
Right.
Okay. Let's keep going.
Oh, dude,
let's jump into verse 5 and then just get moving here.
We're at 6:10 right now.
When did we want to stop?
6:10.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been 30 minutes. We can go another 5 though. What you got?
No, that's okay. No reason opening anything else up.
I feel like that was a good concise point, though. I think it was all self-contained and everything, and it's gonna have a lot to do with what we're talking about here. So
yeah, definitely, because in the book of Isaiah, especially, we're going to get into a lot of very condemning passages, and God's going to condemn them, and then he's going to tell them why he's going to condemn them, because that's what God does. He doesn't just punish people and not tell them why he's punishing them. And that's important for us to note.
Mm-hmm.
And so what right does he have to do that? It's more than just he's God. It is because he's sovereign God, but also because they deserve it.
Yeah,
they
right.
deserve punishment, and the standard by which he has given them not only originated in the formation of their nation and that which was suppressed through the years, but also that which God has written on their hearts.
Right. That's what I was going to say, written on their heart.
Yeah, there are certain things that are just known. And those things cause us to say, okay, why is this? Where did this come from? And the more you seek that out, you go, oh, well, it sources itself in God. It doesn't source itself in any other religions, because no other religions is as logical and rational as the Word of God. And that is a can of worms. So
Yeah,
I apologize that I've made such a bold statement, and I'm not going to
right at the end here too. Yeah. Call Logan if you want to take him up on that one.
Yeah. I'll point you to some good sources.
You got his number.
But Ravi.
Well, that did not feel like 30 minutes though. You know it.
Ravi Zacharias. Do you know that name?
Yeah, you showed him to me before.
Yeah, he just passed away.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he sure did. He is an apologist. Probably wouldn't agree with everything that he said.
When did that happen?
But he does a really good job at addressing what we just talked about, with God's the supremacy of the biblical religion as opposed to the world religion, the religions of the world. He does a fantastic job at defending that, and so I would point you to that if anyone's interested. What did you say?
No, I was just asking when that happened.
Like yesterday, I think.
Really?
This week. Yeah, this week.
Wow.
He had cancer, and it happened really fast. It may not have been that fast, but for me, it was fast because it's like 1 minute. I hear I'm on a friend's Facebook page, and he says that he has cancer, and I'm like, wow, I did not know that. And then the next minute, Amanda is telling me that he passed away. So
yeah,
but he did a lot of really good work before he died. And I take some of the stuff he says with a grain of salt, I'm sure, but just as far as defending Christianity as the most rational, philosophically rational religion, and the one that addresses kind of the human condition in the best way, I think he is a great resource to go and scope out. But like I said, when it comes to baptism and things like that, I don't know how some people are able to sweep that under the rug when it's so blatantly in the text. But still, I think he does a good job in defending the supremacy of Christ and Christianity.
Right.
All right. Well.
All right. That's been a quick podcast. May not actually be quick. May not actually be quick by the time you watch it. I'm not sure. It felt quick to me. So this has been Keith and Logan.
We'll try to keep it at that length. I think from now.
We'll actually go through Isaiah next week. Yeah. That might be better.
But
life's upturned pretty quick. Yeah.
Yeah. These are important points to the Isaiah's themes. So.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't think they're a waste of time. All right. Well, yeah, we will.
We'll talk to you later.
See you next time.